Right, convening the weekly meeting of the Faustiest witches in all of the land. Those present, could you please state your name and pronoun?
I am he, him.
You are he, him.
Yep.
Hello, he, him. What are your pronouns, he, him? I said name and pronouns.
Yeah, my name is Chris.
Your name is he. Are you He-Man? Are you
He-Man?
He-Man.
He-Man.
People in the comments.
Power of Grayskull.
Be also kind enough to give us your names and pronouns. I don't believe in the rules you have to give up your real name or real pronouns, presumably because we're online. Is that right? Don't know.
Do whatever you like.
Right, Chris. What's a pronoun? I am struggling with this. We only learn verbs at school. Verbs are doing words, and I'm very much a doer. What is the adjectives and the nouns and the various other types of adjectives and nouns?
You are not going to make me do that. Look at that. Look at Jason trying to be funny.
What does Jason say? This is it here. I am him.
No, that's pronounced. That's pronounced she.
She. Okay.
He's trying to be funny. It's Gaelic.
I think Jason's doing well. The petulant one is the petulant pixie, and their pronoun is Faye. Ooh, okay. Exciting stuff. Now, there's a big push nowadays, and lots of talk and such about making people more comfortable with language and stuff that's used as our language needs to evolve, and the way in which we talk to each other and such, which, I mean, language, unless it's a dead language, is always evolving. Some people's vocabularies are quite limited. Some people's vocabularies continue to get bigger and bigger, particularly mine. Now I've subscribed to the swear word of the day. I like to think I've got all sorts of new words.
Can you swear in multiple languages now?
I can't do multiple languages yet, but I'm sure there's some sort of Rosetta Stone course for that. I'm not sure. If not, there should be. So maybe the Centre of Excellence needs to do a diploma in swearing. That would be the Centre of Excellence course I'd actually consider doing, you know?
They do say it proves their level of intelligence, actually. They say that swearing says you have an expansive vocabulary.
I was heard that it was the opposite.
No.
I heard when at school you were told don't say fuck or something like that. Think of all of the wonderful words you could say instead of fuck. And you can use fuck for lots of things. You can say fuck as in fucking, having sex time. Right? You can say fuck as in I don't give a fuck. You can say fuck as in you're a little fuck. I mean, it's a very versatile word for a very versatile young man. I wish I was at the time. So pronouns and nouns and all this sort of stuff, because I was really shit at school, right? I really struggled. And when I say nouns, adjectives and stuff like that, like, I am not shitting you. I only ever learned what a verb was, right? Okay. Verb was the kind of, they had the word war, and then there was like, in certain colors, there was like adjective, there was this, there was that. I think nouns might have been yellow, adjectives were green, verbs were like this Coca-Cola color, and then there was pronouns. I don't know. There's proper nouns. And
noun, okay, Liam, a noun is a naming word, hence why we use the word pronoun, which means preferred noun. Preferred naming is essentially the context in which we use a pronoun for. And so you are choosing the gender of the noun. So we don't have it so much in our language. Ours is quite neutral.
Yeah.
Whereas
lots they do, though, don't they? It's fucking annoying.
Lots of romantic languages gender words. whereas we don't really have that in English.
Right.
But yes, your verbs are the doing words.
The verbs
That's
are the
probably
doing
why
words,
you know those.
and doers are the most important words. If we didn't do stuff...
So, see, I prefer adjectives.
Adjectives.
I like the describing words.
Describing words. Oozing trickle, is that descriptive language?
What was that?
Oozing trickle. Wait a minute. Do you want me to spell it? Oozing.
No, it's fine.
Trickle.
It's fine. Jason didn't hear you correctly. Jason says Liam is versatile. Noted.
Oozing trickle. I don't know where that even come from. I didn't even write that. Oh, honestly. Yes, that's fun.
Anyway, so what was the point of this one? You didn't ask me about this one.
No, I know. Right, pronouns. What is a pronoun? Pronouns are short words we swap in for other nouns to make our writing and speech faster and more varied. They are words like they, I, you, blah, blah, blah. So I'm getting the impression with all of this, we're attempting speed, but it comes at an expense of being specific, right? Because if someone was, for example, to ask you, Mr. Chris, what type of witch are you, right? It would take them so long, probably multiple lifetimes, to really appreciate truly what your style of craft and such consists of. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of that, we want to get that across in less than one lifetime, albeit we actually only want to get that across in one sentence, possibly only one word even. So with that, there comes not much specifics, a lot of abbreviation as well. So we'd condense that to, I don't know, a green witch, Chris? A green witch, a hedge witch?
No.
Norse pagan Celtic witch? I don't know. What are you? None of those things. None of the above. What would you say? Professional witch?
At a push, I would say professional witch.
Professional witch.
Generally speaking, witch is just the word I'm comfortable with. Beyond that, then just feels like you're missing the point. Because to me, witch then becomes a doing word. It's not a talking about word. So for me, witch kind of covers all the grounds that it needs to cover. We obviously discovered another version of that we use for one calypso, don't we? Which is classical witch.
I do like that term.
I'd accept that.
Oh.
If I had to, but yeah, witch is about the only word that suits me. What?
Bitch witch? I'm a bitch witch.
No, because that suggests that I work for somebody else. I don't like that.
Not as in a nasty bitch, then.
No.
Okay.
I don't mind being a Fausty witch. I've got to used to that one.
You're a professional classical Fausty witch. There we go. We've created a new thing, right? Now, the reason for this gender Quake episode and such is I'm trying to put a couple of points, and also this is all like the latest thing, isn't it? Rethinking about pronouns and how we address each other and such. And it got me thinking, as I often do, about the flaws in everything, right? So there's certain flaws within the whole introducing your pronouns and stuff that people take the piss out of when it comes to gender and stuff, when they say, everyone in the meeting, tell us your name and tell us your pronouns. When I thought that the point was speed, the point was, I don't really need to know anything about what gender you are. I couldn't give a shit. All I needed to know is that when I say, you over there, Sally, why haven't you delivered in your department? You're fired, right? I don't need the pronouns. And for me, Like you could say Sally if she identifies as a woman, you could say she. But realistically, if you say Sally, I'm going to call you Sally. I'm not going to call you she.
Well, it's interesting you say that, really, because that's how I get around it at work. So to avoid kind of incorrectly pronouncing somebody, because at a college like ours, there is always a number of students questioning or transitioning. There's a variety because of their age group, and that's where they're at. They're still discovering who they are. Add in levels of autism and learning disability. Suddenly, that's an even harder question to answer, which is who am I? I just avoid them altogether. So that my best way to be correct is to just address them by their name, which means addressing them by their chosen name and not the name necessarily that's on their birth certificate, which means that if that was to change, that would be the first thing they would tell me, regardless of gender pronoun. They would go, "Oh, I'm not Jessica now. I'm Jeff." So for me, it's a big one of those for me. Is if I can avoid pronouncing, I will. Which probably would, most people would kind of go, "Oh, okay.
You're one of them. You're one of them, Chris. You're an unsupporter.
Well, maybe.
You're
think it's the safest way.
Which one are you? Which one are you? You're not the middle one, and you don't like the middle one people. Therefore, you're a baddie, and I can tell that not because I've had a conversation with you and know anything about, but I'm going to judge you based on what you've basically not said, which you called me by my name, Chris. How dare you call me by my name? Okay, so I did get into trouble. One of the inspirations for this also was I said I misgendered someone in a place, and I said, they didn't like me calling them a boy, but I didn't. I said, oi. Before I said boy.
That's your dodgy accent.
I actually said, because my accent, oi, come here. But they took offense, Chris. Right? I did not mean to offend them. If I mean to offend people, I go out of my way to offend them. And I'm not going to do it like that because, well, I would do it like that if I thought it was truly offensive and it would really upset someone. But most of the time, it's not good enough. So I need to think a bit more outside of the box and put some effort into thinking what is going to cause the most amount of devastation. Mispronouncing people is probably not the best way to do it. But again, equating things. I don't get it because I think you've talked about, or we have discussed, the speed thing. The speed thing is about putting the most amount of information out for people to make a prejudgment and putting it in the form of a word. So if you say, my name is Chris and I am a woman, then you're putting across a bunch of information. The problem is that you're always going for speed versus accuracy. And we prefer accuracy. I think most of the time we like in-depth substance and conversation. Despite it being the Fausty Witches show, we do talk about some things with some substance sometimes. Within the magical community, this is the same. I'm seeing that this is the same. I'm seeing it as occultism in general, magic in general, traditions in general, really fucking secretive. Like, don't actively try. They use verbs and shit, Chris, like they do stuff to prevent other people finding out their secrets and finding out information on themselves and their practices in group and such like that. So I don't really get so much the idea that we want to speed up the process to make it more easy for people to understand what we're working on, who we are, and that when it comes to magical practice. But this whole pronoun thing and this whole condensing and creating many different types of witchcraft in order to put that across and then basically say, well, what do you mean you don't know what green witch is? It's like, I've told you I'm a green witch, or I've told you I'm a kitchen witch. It's kind of like, I think, as we've probably highlighted sometimes before, it's like either be specific or don't bother at all. Because if you're giving us something that is too easy to misinterpret, or that for everyday people they're just not going to fucking understand, what's the point? I really don't get people that have to give the what are witch are you, I'm a green witch, or I'm a kitchen witch, and then they say a kitchen witch is this. It would have just been easier to say, I might put my menstrual blood in the cooking and feed it to my husband in the soup to keep him faithful. It might be easier to say that, because that way we know that this person's clearly crazy and clearly has some sort of abandonment issues, is where their husband's going to run off. You know, that tells us so much more. Just that one thing, little rather than one word, we turn that into a sentence. That tells us so much more about you than what kitchen witch would have told us. Because it tells us immediately, don't try your cooking, doesn't it?
I think the biggest part is really it's about identity, and it's about individualizing. But with this new concept of trying to create a universal language. So, you know, the problem is, like with the alphabet soup, the words are designed for individuality, for self-expression, but ultimately those words only work within the confines of the group itself. So what's tricky is when you get to the point where the words don't mean anything within the group you're targeting at. So at the point where, you know, you've got 100 or so different words now for gender identity and sexuality and all those kind of sexual orientation and gender identity, to the point that I don't know them all. So as a gay person, I find that tricky to kind of go, can you tell me what I need to know about you without me having to look it up? Because, and I think that with witchcraft, that's got similar to, where because there's crossover, and if we were to talk about the Venn diagram of humanity, I can imagine that there is a lot of people that fit in the alphabet soup category that also overlap into the witchcraft category. Because as far as I'm aware, there is just as many witches in the alphabet soup group as there are vegans or vegetarians or, you know, or new agers, because they all cross over in this kind of grey, you know. So they're all aware of the same problem, which is if you're too specific, you no longer fit in any of the groups at all, and nobody knows what you are. And by that, we're not talking about gender here. I'm talking specifically about naming things. And the same's kind of happened with witchcraft, is you've got such a degree of separations into these little groups like kitchen witch, and it gets further and further, you know, eclectic. You know, once upon a time it was, are you Wiccan or not? Like that to a certain extent, that was a bigger.
No, it wasn't that, because there was only Wicca in the 1950s, because every other person knew how to keep their fucking mouth shut. Back then it was, are you Alexandrian or Gardnerian? That's all it was.
No, but that's how the whole word hedge witch came along, though, wasn't it? The whole point was, I'm not Wiccan, hedge witch.
Traditional witch, you mean?
That's the one. Traditional.
I'm traditional.
Traditional witch. To me, they're all blurred to one now. That's my point.
Do you subscribe to this no money magic type shite and such? No, I'm traditional. Traditional witch.
Yeah.
Well, if that person's a traditional witch, whatever would a classical witch do?
Exactly. Skin you alive for a halfpenny.
Just read some classical literature. In it, you'll find a lot of examples of what a classical witch will do to you if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, Chris. So Jason says, several languages eschew the pronouns and articles in conversation. This seems like an English problem.
It's not an English problem.
No, Brexit is an English problem.
Yes, Brexit is an English problem. Pronouns are an LGBT alphabet soup problem. But yes, carry on.
Hello, Lollygoggins. Lollygoggins is back. Lollygoggins used to be here a while ago, didn't Lollygoggins? I was going to pronoun Lollygoggins, but I thought I'd best not on this show. It seems like the various witch identities exploded with the internet and the general counter Wiccan movement. I think this is very true, Chris. Mr. Jason, yes, very true. Classical witch equals turn them to pigs. Yes, turn them into pigs, and a lot worse.
What a bunch of swines.
Now, can we move on to gender now?
Okay, you're actually going to deal with gender. Go on.
Gender is an interesting thing because, again, it's another thing that people are having more conversations about. It's one of those things that we used to all just assume everyone thought the same thing about gender as yourself. You know, you would just, everyone thinks the same about gender. It's not even something that you would think about. Like they were talking at the self-heal. How many people actually write about self-heal? No, not in lots of old books. There ain't a lot about it because it was such common knowledge. Everyone just assumed you'd know about it, right? So with a gender, this is a dictionary, in Oxford Languages Dictionary of gender. Either of the two sexes, male and female, they put in brackets. See, it says either of the two, implying there's only two. Especially when
But you're talking about sex, which is the clarification there.
Yes, either the two sexes. Mm-hmm. Especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones. So this is all about psychology and sociology. It's more about sociology, isn't it? Because sociology is about making bigger assumptions about big groups of people, isn't it? They make their money out of doing that, don't they? And getting it right more than 50% of the time is what they aim for, isn't it? Is that not what sociologists do? I mean, they're never right 100% of the time, but they're like,
if we get
nothing. 50%,
I am leaving you to dig this hole yourself. I am not getting involved.
I've always been more of a fan for psychology. I like manipulating individuals rather than crowds. But there we go. So, the term is also used more broadly to denote a range of identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. Okay, so this is quite interesting, the concept and idea of gender. Gender being something that you yourself pick, and that is not something that you can look at someone and guess their gender, which you can always guess. You can guess anything. I can have.
Okay.
What?
The easiest way for you to not keep dropping yourself in it, which you are already, is consider them separately. You use that word choice that will get us in all sorts of trouble. People don't choose their gender.
Do they not? I thought that was the new push.
No, they self-identify, which is not the same as choosing. It's an awareness of something that already exists.
Because I am ignorant of this and I do not actually understand. So choosing means that you decide yourself now?
Yes.
Self-identification is
self-identification is not the same as choosing. Self-identification is an awareness of space, awareness of place in category. That is not a choice. You are that phrase is like saying. So, Liam, would you say you choose to be gay, or you just are?
I would say that I don't choose to be.
There you go. You don't
choose to do gay things.
You can choose to do gay things, yes. Yeah. But you don't choose to be gay the same way you don't choose to be male or female or gendered. It's not a choice, you are. Okay?
Right, okay.
So the way to make your robot brain understand this is the separation of male, female is sex.
Biological sex, please.
Biological sex.
That's what I put. I got to design forums and shit, and I've put biological sex now in brackets instead of gender because I'm learning.
Don't use the word
trying to learn.
So the better we get at avoiding using the word gender, is to avoid mixing those two things together. Sex means biological sex.
Yeah.
Gender is identity. At that point, you stop messing them up.
Social construct, because they took gender roles and such.
Gender roles is again tied to the social economics of sex. We're not talking about gender. This is where the words get used differently in different contexts, which is why this is all fucked up in the
This is why I struggle to understand this.
Yes, because depending on which context you're referring to it will depend on what you're actually meaning.
Right. So has this been solved yet, this conundrum? Is there a standardization like you get with regulations and such?
I think the standardized process within our own community is to separate gender from sex.
Okay, I've started doing that.
So as long as you can keep to that in all aspects, you'll be fine.
Okay.
And Jason says I should let him keep going because he's enjoying it.
Okay, right.
But I don't think you should.
So we need to rewrite. There was some interesting thing that popped up on the World Health Organization has an entire page about gender and health, which was really, really interesting. Doesn't one of the Hermetic laws have to do with gender, and do we therefore need to rewrite it potentially?
Depends again.
Principles, one of the 7, gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. I think this is old-fashioned and therefore needs to be updated to biological sex. Is that right?
No, it just needs to be. It just needs to be called duality, which is what I call it.
Duality is way better. It sounds more mystical as well.
But that's because I don't think it has anything to do with gender in that essence. What they're talking about is masculine versus feminine. And we both know that all the sexes have different combinations of those two, regardless of what dangles between your legs or doesn't dangle.
Say that again, but slower.
Slower?
Yeah.
As in what? Which bit?
Well, the bit about the one of the Hermetic laws and such is going to be duality now. So we're not calling it gender, right? The law of duality and polarity. But there's already a polarity rule. So why do we need duality?
But polarity is very different to duality. Duality suggests
it's a different law, isn't it? I mean, they didn't say, look, we've got 7 mysteries here. I've thought of 6. Can we change one of them so they're almost different? Maybe, potentially. I don't know. Can we do that? Yeah, let's do it. Let's just go for the duality thing, which at the moment we'll put it as gender. In the future, they can change it to duality when Liam and Chris come along.
Did you see this? Jason is blaming us for the gardener. Look at that.
This is gold. 2 British witches discussing gender on soil that birthed several extremely gendered modern witch cults. This is correct. I mean, it was the British that created Wicca, right? And okay, wasn't the best. But then when you look at what the fuck happened when the Americans got their hands on it, oh dear Lord.
Blue Wicca.
It were something else. I mean, yeah, we had the old Gerald Gardner nudist playing about with his winky in the garden and saying you can't do money spells and such. But I mean, when it went to America and then got reintroduced back here, it was really something else. But yeah, I mean, they were Wiccans. What do you expect, Jason?
Well, let's not start on the list of things that the Americans took that was British and made worse. You know, most of them were pretty bad to begin with. But yeah, let's not go down that list.
So, duality, polarity, all of this. We've changed down one of the Hermetic rules from gender to duality. Okay. I think this is a lot better. So, gender in terms of whether it matters in the context of magic, I would say, personally, from my own experience, that when I work magic in the form of a group, I look at the individuals of the group. I look at strengths, weaknesses. We come together, we design something, we go and do it. I don't necessarily pick cookie cutter rituals and stuff myself, right? So this whole idea of you need to be this type of gender or that type of gender or this biological sex or that biological sex, or you can't play in the circle type shit that you do get in paganism sometimes. I find that very strange. I find that very unusual because for me, obviously, my magic is practical based. It's not about, oh, I'm going to try and recreate this, or I'm never doing something because a book or someone else has told me to do it. I design it myself, right? So I design things like when I used to play with the Legos. I make what I can with the Lego blocks I've got, right? I don't go, I'm going to make a spaceship and realize that mummy threw away the space Lego. I got halfway there and thought, well, it's looking a little bit more like some sort of Goa'uld Stargate Egyptian bullshit space station. No, I didn't go like that. I thought, what can I do? What are the building blocks I have got? And then I'll go. What I'm seeing is people are trying to take the concept of a ritual and say, well, we need these specific building blocks. So, oh, we've got this old traditional witchcraft, or probably not traditional witchcraft, probably a Wiccan ritual or something like that. It's like, oh, well, we need to get a man and we need to get a woman. They need to get jiggy with it, but we need a real one.
No.
We need a real one because we're not doing the real sexy time. We'll just do it symbolically, which I find the whole thing is very weird. But then I'm not Wiccan, so you know. But there we go. So it's kind of like, I suppose, does gender matter at all, Chris? Have you, or here's another question, actually, probably a better question. Has there ever been a time where gender has mattered in any of the magical work you've done, either yourself or with groups of people or whatever?
No.
Ever? It's never been an issue, right?
No.
Are you aware of it being an issue for other people, other groups, other practitioners and such? Because I go online, right, and I see nothing but this online.
Only for bigots.
Bigot? Is that a type
of gender? No.
There are a lot of them, though. I mean, if there was on the actual, what is it that you do? I forget. It's not the Doomsday Book anymore. The census. That's it. On the census, if they write the question, "Are you a bigot?" and enough people clicked yes or ticked yes, society would be very, very different. I think. Do you think old Donald Trump's missing a trick there? He could have introduced that, couldn't he? Because they talk about, making bigotry and such official by putting one in the White House, and that the Americans used to say that, right? Or some of them, the lefties did. And then it's kind of like, well, is that really the case? I don't know if that's the case. But I mean, if you had a census, and one of the questions on the census is, are you a bigot? Then we could count up how many self-identifying bigots there are. And if there are more than 50%, say 51%, we could say officially that country is a bigotry country, Don't know. Interesting, isn't it? Oh, we've got more questions and such. In Dutch, the word for them is the same as the word for she. Imagine the difficulties this brings. Definitely not an English problem. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I learned something else. I was waiting for you to bring up us Americans. Lols.
As opposed to the Americans.
The Americans. Yes, the Americans are a bit more proactive. They're glass half full type of people. The Americans are glass half empty kind of people. Of course, how many people, Americans or cants, have got glasses that are, let's say, less than full? Chris, would you like to put a percentage on that?
No. So yeah, to answer your question, no, I've never had any practice for me that's ever mattered in terms of gender, because ultimately, even if your process involved duality, to have both that kind of feminine, the feminine, masculine energy as separate entities, to mix them, whoever's holding those energies doesn't need to have interconnecting genitalia, because actually even with the great right you could make it work. regardless of what inny and outy bits you have.
In this Bellamy rituals, right? Imagine if Bellamy did Wicca. That would be brilliant, wouldn't it?
Wicca by Bellamy.
Obviously, there ain't no girls in the Bellamy mansion, right? They just got guys, right? But they still get away with the duality thing because they they choose guys with winkies and that, but they have a blonde and a brunette, right? They've got your duality, you kind of got your opposites, or you've got someone with a bit like chest hairs, and you get like a smooth one. They still do the duality thing. One doesn't just have to pick biological sex for dualities and such. You could pick spiky and smooth, for example. Like fine art in school, when we did art class, we used to have to do these fucking boring ass drawings of like fruit bowls and shit, and there was a whole thing about polarity and duality or whatever the fuck it was. Basically, it was contrast. She made us do one on contrast, and I picked spike.
Positive and negative.
I had to make a picture with spiky things and smooth things, and compare and contrast them using words. What words have to do with art? Fuck knows. But I had to write a load of shit. Obviously, it's preparing us to modern art because, let's be fair, none of us could really draw, so we were never going to make it as the old-fashioned sort of artist. We were only going to make it as attaching an artistic story, because that's all modern art is, a story, to a thing. Like, I don't know, a little bit of metal that goes like that in a saddle. I think was that a Picasso? That wasn't a Picasso. No, that was a Dali, I think, wasn't it? I think that was a Dali. A ram skull. He got a bit of metal that went U-shaped and he put a saddle in it. Sold for a fucking ridiculous amounts of money because it had a good story behind it, Chris. It had a good story. Modern art's all the concept art, they call it. It's all about the concept.
I am not getting into a debate with you about art. You know about as much about art as you do about flowers.
At Michelle, this is a private conversation, Chris. I love it when they have private conversations, and I wonder if they expect us to put up on the screen. If they don't, they should by now. At Michelle, leave it to the British. I would like the British to be in quotation marks, please. The British. To get the snowball rolling, then blame the devastation on someone else.
Hey, like they say, it's not about what you got, it's how you use it. And if the Americans didn't use it properly, that's not our fault.
Speaking of American bigots, wasn't there a Dianic meltdown over trans inclusion? There was this witch, I think she stood about, Z Budapest, I believe her name was, or Titty Breast, or something like that. I don't fucking know. I knew it started with a Z, because they don't say Z over there, they said Z, don't they? Don't really get that. And she apparently used to do, she had this pan-Dianic Wiccan style. It was basically what can I say? How can I say it without being rude? She got a bunch of biological women in a cult, which she was the leader of the cult, and they used to do various magical rituals and stuff, and she'd often do them in pagan festivals and stuff like that. And there was this thing where she refused, I believe, to let trans women in the circle. She also has said very outlandish things with regards to sexism and that with regards to men. I think she said something along the lines of that men aren't allowed to do the work in the circle, they're just allowed to stand guard. She said things like every time a man has sex with a woman, it's rape. Various things like that, right? But yeah, big thing. That was, I believe, the Dianic meltdown that our Jason here was talking about anyway. But I would add that to it. So what determines biological sex during incarnation? How far before incarnation is biological sex determined? Do you just say, I want to go to Earth, and you pop up in whatever body you get matched with? Or do you actually get to pick the gender? And when you pick it, is that when things start happening? So is it a certain, part of the building process in the womb man. Right? Can you remember, Chris? Think back.
I can't remember it being a very important factor, to be honest.
Well, it was for you.
It was a big one for me.
Yeah, I thought that was why you picked the male one, because they were expecting to look for a female one. So when they go a looking, when they go a knocking, the magical Gestapo.
I just have to drop trow.
Well, you were the one that was talking about, rubbing, what was it, like piss or something on yourself to, not obviously you, but hunters and that, to blend in with the environment, with the smells and such like that. So animals that they're hunting don't get the scent of human, right? Is that not what you've done by wearing a male body?
Maybe.
I mean, don't worry, nothing high level watches this show. Sorry, nothing high level or highbrow watches this show.
Don't upset Jason. He thinks he's got well ideas above his station.
Or Jason. Had something to do with the rites of menstruation. Oh.
Okay.
Rites of menstruation does sound like a really rather dodgy horror.
But also they're quite happy for that to have the word men in it. So I'm surprised they used it at all.
Chris.
Maybe they just call it Aunt Flo Day.
Aunt Flo Day. The time one got the painters in.
There were lots of horrible phrases for that, isn't there?
There are a lot of horrible phrases, but all of the horrible ones were named by men, obviously.
Obviously.
Jason says he's just a baby witch. Is that what he self-identifies as?
Bollocks.
I don't think Jason is a baby witch.
No.
So where else are we going with this? Because I've always been very interested with this idea, because I've done the magical occult experiments and such, fucking with people and things and observing with biological sex and sexual orientation, such like that, and the impact and when it comes in and when it, how to tinker with it, let's say, before incarnation. So I was very interested in whether anyone's got any ideas of that, because there was a very sad young man that did once want to pay me to magically change his sexual orientation, which I thought was quite sad, really. Something like sexual orientation is really not, like these days, is not, for a lot of people, like a massive thing. Because, I mean, let's be fair, you can still have children potentially. I think there's bigger fish to fry, such as taking someone that's sterile, right? Because they want a child. Taking someone that's sterile so that they can have a child, it's probably bigger magic, probably more worth my time. Taking someone that's a gay and wants a child, there are many options. I personally, I've got quite strong views about certain things, as we all know, and I get on the firing line from people with the opposite views to me when I say things that are outlandish, like, I don't know, maybe instead of having lots of children, we take go to the dog's home, go and get some that don't have parents before you consider getting child. Maybe we could implement you're really good on communism, aren't you? You're basically a communist. You basically want to be a dictator, Chris, right?
No, communism isn't about a dictatorship. That's the opposite.
With a dictatorship. Sorry, the communism word slipped out. I'm very sorry about that. I apologize. I knew I'd have to apologize a lot for this show. But when you are a dictator, eventually,
I think you've done really well, actually.
When you
compared to usual
take over, right? Would you consider implementing a rule or a law, I should say, that yes, you're allowed to have you're allowed to have the first child, and it can be yours and pass on your genes and stuff. But if you're going to have a second child, the second one you need to adopt, Do you think that could clear the workhouse? No, it's not workhouse. Orphanage, that's what they call it now. Do you think that would help clear the orphanages of the back?
You know, I'd rather go a step further and sterilise everybody at birth and make them pass an exam. But that's...
Chris.
That's because I am a true elitist. Definitely not a communist at all.
So this exam, what would be on this exam? Because I mean, I don't really want children.
No, I've never designed
what adjectives and pronouns are, or I know more about pronouns thanks to today's lesson. But would I pass the exam? It's not going to involve
probably not. Yeah. Probably not.
I got my GCSEs.
But it's not a problem because you don't want any, so it's not a problem, is it?
I don't want them, but what other rights am I going to be left? I mean, some would say having children is a right, but when you do take over, Chris, what other rights do people get granted?
Why do you keep talking about it like it's a future event and hasn't already happened?
If I want to vote, are you also going to implement everyone like kind of, you know, it has been in democracies of the past, you can only vote if you pass an exam. Will you go that far to implement that also?
No, see, voting for me is,
as long as they
voting for me is a fundamental right. Anyway, I wouldn't. No, I'm going to get myself in so much trouble.
Or if you see what Jason's put now.
I know, he's putting all sorts of shit.
And a communist.
I'm definitely not a communist. I'm far too right-wing for that. What was I going to say? I was going to say something else outlandish. Oh, I would never put an exam in the way of voting. I would, however, say something along the lines of, if you've never paid tax, then why should you be voting? But that's just me. That's just me saying, if you've never worked a day in your life, like, you know. But that includes a lot of rich people also. So, you know.
Well, I don't know about that because rich people still pay some taxes. So what type of tax are we doing? Are we talking VAT? Are we talking national insurance? Are we talking...
I don't know. I'm being flippant, Liam. It really doesn't matter.
You know you're going to get your policies sorted when you do take over. You can't be... You got to do the planning, Chris. You can't take over and then just... Because that's how empires crumble, isn't it? Draconian emanations. This sounds like, well, one of your daydreams. Lol, Chris, worrying about Liam digging holes. Global eugenics, elitism is built into communism, by the way. There is also an elite running it. Doesn't work otherwise. This is a new person, I do believe.
Yes. He chooses
to be some kind of woke stream based on title. Pleasantly surprised to see it's just a sensible conversation about the topic. Appreciate the real talk. Well, I don't know. If we're doing sensible, I am a little bit worried. It's supposed to be far from sensible, you know, thanks to Witcher show, but there we go.
So,
have we got any more sensible things to add? We've talked gender. We've talked...
I don't know. You've skipped loads of other shit going up
What
there.
other shit are we supposed to talk about?
So, no, as in there were other stuff up here.
Oh.
So Lauren says Agrippa talks about natural magic, about pregnant people being able to design their babies.
Was Agrippa a Nazi? I think the Nazis came a lot later than Agrippa, but that does sound like quite a designer children. I get that designer children kind of vibe.
Designer children? How do you go automatically from designer children to Nazis?
Because Nazis would so be interested in designer children. I mean,
they would be, but I'm still curious as to how you automatically go straight there.
They'd all be blonde, blue-eyed, fairly tall, right? Wouldn't they? I mean, that's what they'd be picking. In fact, I don't even think when they give the mum and dad the iPad where they click it, I don't even think it would be an option. There'd be some things that they were able to choose, but that would just be a constant, a sure thing, wouldn't it?
there were so many more interesting things you could have said about that, and you go straight to Nazis. That's all I'm saying.
Well, I don't know. When people mention eugenics, I think Nazis. And designer babies, I think eugenics. So it's not that, you know.
Oh, I forgot. Okay. Robot. There is a
flow
chart. There's
a
flow chart.
It's like a PCR. It's like a ladder programming with me. You know, basically, I am a fucking robot. Logical, right? But Chris, where do you stand on the designer baby thing? Because that's going to be coming in. Are you someone that says, yes, you can design your babies whatever you like? Or are you saying that, okay, the doctor only designs the baby to write out some of the, you know, maybe some of the genetic traits that mean you're going to die early, or, you know, ain't that useful for the coal mines, right? Where do you stand with this? In your new totalitarian regime, are you going to allow the parents to design the babies, or is it going to be kind of like where they, you know, they decide what apprenticeships get funding because it's based on, you know, what jobs are needed? So you're going to say, look, we're short of miners, we're short of this, that, and the other, or we will be from current models in another 20 years' time. Therefore, we need a certain amount of designer babies that are going to be quite good with the whole black lung thing, right? That are strong and resilient and can, like, strong but short, right? They need to be strong but short so they can go down the mines, you know. Like, are you going to go that far? Are you going to leave it to the parents to decide?
What as create? You want me to find a justification for creating hobbit dwarves? Is that what you're telling me?
There is a justification for creating.
Are they all going to sing? Do they have to have really good singing voices as well, so that they can sing the I Ho song?
Off the work they go. Well, I just imagined it would be more like some kind of George Orwellian, like they'd have speaker systems, and then at that time of morning, that song would just come on. They wouldn't need to sing it. I think that's a little bit more what I was going for.
Oh, okay.
They're going to be miserable. They're not going to be wanting to sing.
I must say, I have very little thoughts on designer babies.
No.
I get what they're trying to do. I'm not sure how I feel about any of it because I've never really given it any thought because I don't plan on having children. So there is that part there.
Well, you have the nation will be your children when you take over, won't it? You'd be one of those people that's like says that and shit. All dictators do, don't they?
Okay.
Lean is always Godwin's lawing. It all comes back to Nazis. No, it doesn't. Lauren, that's bullshit. We all know it all comes back to Bellamy, which some would say is not too dissimilar from Nazism because I don't know. Did they have an unusual amount of blonde ones there?
They do. They definitely do.
I don't know.
So another one that you've missed. There was one from Michelle up here.
Upvoting Michelle's question. Can they do that, Chris? I didn't realise that they can upvote a question. Apparently, that's a new thing.
Well, I'm trying to catch them, but you keep trying to override me. So Michelle said a while ago about this. So can a gender/sex be part of a contract, an agreement that you make? And in what instances would that be? What deity would require that? So I think she's going back to, she must have probably said that when you were talking about before the womb designing.
And such, right. Do you want to answer that? I don't know if we would agree, disagree, but I think from that perspective, where's the question again?
Well, my answer on that one would be more a case of what you want it back up.
Yeah, pop it up for me.
And my thoughts on that, which go very similar to Lauren's point about designer babies in terms of magically designer babies, is how much you think gender plays a part on what they achieve. Because to me, I without sounding too soppy about it, I kind of wouldn't care so much about what gender the baby came out as, but more a case of how well, how healthy, could they live long enough to actually make the good shit happen? Like, so I don't know, my kind of genetics concerns wouldn't really be about gender, but that might just be me.
See, for me, it's all about the clones. I would want to do something like Star Wars. Like, I don't really care about the designer baby thing. I don't really care about having children and such. I would rather raise myself, right? So, like in Star Wars, they had the clone colony and that, and they had one guy that was cloned and he became a load of stormtroopers and shit. But he had one himself, like a son, which basically grew up. It's like one of the people that wears the
Boba Fett.
A little bit up with Star Wars, but there's one of the like Mandalorian type people, right?
Boba Fett.
That's Boba Fett. That's it. That's fascinating. That's a really interesting idea. Maybe not so much the designer children, even if I could design it on the iPad with my GP and such advising me, I still probably wouldn't go for having children. Give me a clone. I mean, I could so be a Dr. Evil with a clone and that. That would be brilliant. Mini me. Can you imagine Liam with a mini me? That would be fucking
That's a terrifying thought.
Really, I need two of them. I need two mini me's, because obviously you need an heir and a spare, don't we? And they can walk around and they just follow me along.
Wow. That's creepy.
But no, Michelle, in order to answer your question, I need to read it. So I will do that seriously now. Can your gender / sex, let's just go for biological sex, be part of a contract? It can be an agreement that you make. And in what instances would that be? Well, if you've agreed to a contract, it would be for a reason. So you would have agreed it, wouldn't you? So for what reason that would be, there could be so many different ones. What deity would require that? I don't see any deity requiring it, but then also I wouldn't see any deity as really getting involved with your incarnation. It's your incarnation at the end of the day, which is, of course, I think one of the big lies that people tend to like to get told with religion and stuff. It's all about the Jesus and the God and that, forcing you to do shit. It's kind of like, well, actually, repercussions was that rule that they say, you know. Yeah, repercussions. You made some choices and now you're here. Do your best with what you've got. That would be what I would say to that. I don't know if that actually answered the question.
I think it answers it okay. Another one that you skipped was a follow-up by Lauren that says, so it is potentially tinkered with by an outsider / in quotes, mom, after incarnation but before birth. So for me, that would be a question is for Lauren is to think about, where does incarnation begin? Because we have a tendency to talk about conception, but actually, at what point is the decision being made? Because that suggests that you're choosing which mommy and daddy you're born to, or mommy and mommy, or daddy and daddy these days. But, you are wondering at that point if you are designing an entire storyline or if you're just picking the character. Because those two things are very different. If you're thinking that entire storyline is designed before incarnation, where do you consider that incarnation to begin? But again, this is the Zephyr end. So you kind of need to be thinking about where does incarnation become? So from the idea stage all the way through to the execution, how much do you think, in terms of power to decide, do you feel we have when creating our new incarnation? But that gives you plenty to think about.
What's the next question?
I think we go over the draconian stuff happened. We did that. So now we're back to this end, aren't we?
That one's written my name like loads and loads of times as well, so I better answer that. Gestational influence is real? ? So that is a question. It felt like a statement, but I think it is a gestation. A question. Gestational influence is real ? Is gestational influence real? Well, yes and no. Yes, it depends on success, I suppose. It's real if you are successful at doing it. It's not real if you don't do it. How are you doing it? Are you doing it via science, tinkering and such? Kicking the tummy of the mummy? I don't know. Or is there something else, magically speaking? I have met people that attempt to create magical children. It doesn't necessarily end that well. Generally speaking, it's better to guide magical children, not guide as in force into being something, really just a case of making it a viable and economic option for doing so. I've worked with parents, couples to help with that. Anything you'd like to say?
No, I think I've already. I think to a certain extent we've already answered it. It was just, trying to get back into order.
Liam, why would parents design their babies for the state to force them into coal mines? No, you missed the point. I was asking Chris when he does take over the world, right? Will he let the parents design their babies, or will it be just down to departments to state, okay, we've got jobs going, we are going to design children's babies to suit jobs? Or will it be the doctors, or what? And that was the question posed to him and his new regime. You know, I'm not saying that the parents would do that. I'm saying if the parents don't get the option of designing the children, but there is still design choices being made, who gets to decide? Does the doctor just say, right, we're going to write out these bits because we know there is, potentially chronic disease is going to come with this, chronic disease is going to come with that, we'll get rid of this, change that about, Or is it a case of literally the government, Chris's one world government, the New World Order? Is it going to be that the state decides? The state's going to decide we need to breed this type of person for these types of jobs that will be going up? That was my question, essentially. Chris never answered that. He's still working on the policies as we speak. Helen, designer babies are already popular in the higher echelons of many Asian cultures. I think that's probably true. Actually, I've heard rumblings of that. Clearly, the answer is baby credits. You get a set number of points to assign to your child's vital statistics. Oh no, that's just cruel, isn't it? That's like when you go on those racing games and you want, well, what do you want? Do you want speed or what? There was this old robot thing, because I'm a robot, I love robot things, on killsometime.com, and it was like this multiplayer game, and you had to design your robot, but you could pick like speed, attack, defense, and that, and you had to tweak it, but you can't put all of it up to the top. You could be fast but have really shit shields, or you could have good shields but not very good attack, all that sort of thing. I think that's what Jason's clearly wanting. He's got a sick sense of humor, though, hasn't he? Lauren, anyway, I was saying an expectant mum could influence on purpose or an accident the gender or sexual orientation of their child despite what the incarnation plan was. No. From a scientific perspective, I think there is some literature, experiments and studies done on this, something along the lines of the mother determining sexual orientation. There was some sort of science that was been done. I remember reading something about it where they studied what the mother needed at the time. So if the mother was in a frightened state or in a bad place in her life, uncomfortable, then the baby normally would be a bit more characteristically boisterous, macho kind of sort, whereas if it was more the opposite, it was kind of nice, calm state, it seemed to be more like it was going to be a limp-wristed dancer type, right? So I don't think we have any more questions, have we? There's quite a few questions, but we're already over. I think we're going to really first to the appearance over internal stuff. Right. Any more? Lauren's question. I'm the context makes me think of Demigod's podcast. Oh yeah, the old Demigod's podcast. I believe only your reason for being right here now is this reincarnation is relevant. All the rest I think is random biology. Gattaca. I watched that. Can't really remember what happened in the end. Designer babies. Lol. Anakin Skywalker didn't exactly work out too well for the Sith. Yes. # just saying. Yes, that's that kind of convergence with the Force, and I think it was, what was it, Palpatine and I don't know what Palpatine's master was, but they were trying to do some shenanigans to bring power to the dark side of the Force or something, and they ended up trying to create some sort of forced baby or something. I've known medical practitioners try to do things similar to that. Does it end well? Not necessarily.
Oh, Draconian's just given you his name now. That would be Darth Plagueis.
Darth Plagueis, that was it. Plagueis and Palpatine. Palpatine and R2-D2 are my two favorite people from Star Wars. I think I like R2-D2 a little bit more, but Palpatine is up there. I can imagine he doesn't have friends, but that we would be some way associates. Upvoting Jason. What was fucking Jason's one? I think we answered.
We've already dealt with it. It was ages ago.
Have we got any more, Chris?
No, there's just some interesting comments, kind of that sex, gender, a huge part of earthly experience. Testosterone, estrogen in the womb can influence sexual orientation. It's one scientific thought process, but not all. Gender can lead to magical predispositions, especially in ethnically based practices. I think that's an interesting one because obviously there is a benefit in certain practices, but generally power-wise, if all we're talking about is magical, development, the gender has no impact on that, regardless of what practice you grow up in. Doesn't actually lean you specifically one way or another.
Are you admitting to being a walk-in, Chris, now? Are you admitting to possessing some baby? And then, is it what they do in the Fae land when they have, like, what is it, the Fae, where they steal your children and replace it with a Fae? Or have you just admitted that live on YouTube and Facebook and such? Have you admitted?
I said nothing. Michelle says everything. Anuk says once everything you could identify with as gets stripped away, there isn't so relevant anymore. Identity as a construct. I think we can all agree that to a certain extent. If we just keep on chatting, will you keep streaming? Depends on if it stays useful or relevant. If it just is bullshit about gender, I think I'll get bored very quickly. Following on to say, don't know, don't care for me. I see no use in this info other than eugenics. Maybe after death between lives, but in life makes all the difference. I don't know. I think it depends on where in the world you are at a particular time. I think place and time has more impact than your gender, depending on where you need to be at what point. So, my life, I know, would have been very different if I was born in the US or if I was born in South Africa. That would completely change in which the life that I've led up until this point would be very different.
I strangely can see you living and growing up in the Congo.
So, probably. But yeah, I think that has more, and I don't know, I think we fixate a little bit too much on gender and sex than we probably should because it's so politically charged. I think if we kept this strictly to witchcraft and actually what that means, you've got two men here both describing themselves as witches, which we have no gender to that. But there are lots of people that have argued over the years, aren't you a warlock or a wizard? Like, do you know what I mean? So that genderization is something that happens politically and not so much in the execution. And I think that's the difference for me, just to go back and kind of end on that kind of comment.
They wouldn't like the word warlock in that place in Somerset, Chris.
Moss Iceland Spaceport. You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious.
And that's it. That's it for another edition of the Fausty Witches Show. How many people thought that we were really going to say something controversial and absolutely terrible and get kicked off the internet, like we did on that Lady Snake episode, where they actually kicked us off the internet? I know, crazy, isn't it? I think we didn't do too badly. Right. Goodbye, everyone.